This is Campaign Now, a conversation with Mark Block. Let's get started.
So after college, let's just jump back to this. After college, you graduated in 1976, right?
77.
77. You went to the private sector after? No,
I went to work as a legislative assistant
in D.C.
to the late Congressman Bill Steiger, which was a phenomenal experience. What a mentor. He was on Ways and Means. That's great. One of the great stories about I had with Bill Steiger is, you got to remember, I'm this 21-year-old kid, white wig. I'm in Washington D.C. and the world's revolving around you. Across the streets, Walter Cronkite. This is where everything in the world's happening. And it was a spring, and we get a phone call in the office by one of the constituents in Oshkosh, right? Just screaming at me about, get the congressman on the phone with me right now. The Coast Guard hasn't put the buoys out yet in Lake Winnebago. How are we going to be able to handle this? I panic, right? Now, you got to understand what's going on in Congress at the time. Bill Steiger is a ranking minority in Ways and Means, and he's taking on President Jimmy Carter on capital gains rollback, which huge change, right? He's giving a speech on the House floor on capital gains rollback. I run across the street, say, I got to talk to the Congress.
You had to run across the street then. You couldn't just text.
We were in the Longworth House office building, and I got to get the congressman's attention because the Coast Guard didn't put the buoys out in Lake Winnebago yet. He stops in the middle of the speech on the House floor on capital gains rollback, comes out, and I don't know if you've ever been in the House of Representatives, but they got those little cubicles where you sit. And I tell him this crisis back in Oshkosh, and he looks at me and says, puts his hand on my shoulder, says, "Mark, worry about the big problems, not the little." Gets up and goes back and finishes. So I was in Washington. Great time at that point. I mean, John, you go back in the 70s, you could almost walk right up to the White House. Today, you can't get within blocks of it. Yeah. So a lot of things have changed. And then one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my career is leaving Bill Steiger's staff to run a congressional campaign. I was a campaign manager for Susan Engelleiter when the congressional seat in the 9th opened up, and we ran against Jim Sensenbrenner.
A new district at the time?
Yeah, same district. But it was Susan Shannon Engelleiter against James Sensenbrenner, who eventually obviously won the primary. I think it was 40 years before he spoke to me. But the thing that came out of that, the first time I understood how brutal politics can be. Our chairman, Walt Haymaker, actually, I think he was our treasurer of the congressional committee. You were chosen by the caucus. This is when the parties were powerful.
This is the party caucus in the state you were.
Republican, 9th District Republican caucus, right? To see who is endorsed to run for Congress. And that evening was so brutal that Walt had a heart attack and died at the caucus.
Wow.
Right?
Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about brutal politics.
Yeah. How many people showed up to a caucus meeting?
Oh, at that one, it was
hundreds,
probably 600.
600, yeah.
And you had spent all your time up into that one-on-one with all of who's going to be the delegates. And I mean, that was real politics, right? Party politics.
Yeah. So it's Sensenbrenner versus Engelleiter. And the caucus chose who was going to... They chose Sensenbrenner.
Sensenbrenner won.
So there was no, the primary...
We decided to move forward in the primary. I did, and I could speak about it because it was in the newspapers. We lost that race by 650 votes.
Wow.
It was really small. And it was probably the campaign team that lost it, right? I was a campaign manager. I won't name who the press secretary was or who the grassroots person was, because the story I'm about to tell you is probably what lost the race, right? So this is the Thursday night before the election, and the three of us and a bottle of Jack Daniels decided to take down Sensenbrenner signs, okay? I was dropped off early because I really didn't want anything to do with it. The other two continued on, I'm assuming with the Jack Daniels too. The press secretary ended up rear-ending another car.
Oh, wow.
It was parked, and he fled the scene of the accident.
Wow.
When the cops opened the trunk, it was full of Sensenbrenner signs. So the headlines in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on Saturday before the election was this incident. One could suggest that cost the election.
Yeah.
So,
and what year was this? This was
1978.
1978. Wow.
Yeah, that was when I decided it was best to leave politics for a while. And I got a job at NCR Corporation, which I spent the next 12 years at. But you talk about change and how things changed in politics. So this 1979, and I'm working in NCR Corporation, but still have my fingers in politics. This is when I met John MacIver, okay? George Bush was running against Ronald Reagan, 1979. And I was doing a lot of volunteer work for George Bush, so I worked pretty closely with John MacIver. You know, Jeb Bush and Neil Bush all stayed at my house, and you know, we were all young whippersnappers then, but I'll never forget. It was 1979. The PC had just been introduced, right? And there's a thing called SuperCalc at the time, right? So, and I graduated college with a business degree, not a political science, business degree.
Business, okay.
So I'm looking at this new spreadsheet that we're being taught at NCR Corporation on how to sell these PCs. So I load the voter database in this SuperCalc, right? And I take it down and show it to John MacIver down at his office. He was at Michael Best and Friedrich. And it flabbergasted him how, you know, with 1 second, you can change all these numbers. And if you get 2 more percentage points here, this is what happens. And it's the first time somebody of his stature, I think, really started grasping what's eventually changed in how you run political campaigns.
Data-driven.
Using technology.
A data-driven campaign, basically. So this is, I mean, you know, Campaign Now, everything we do is very data-driven, right? I mean, that's just, it's kind of, I'm a business major like you. I had a poli-sci minor, but I mean, I love just had an affinity for spreadsheets and data really, you know, really early on and could really understand statistics and really now, you know, we're really familiar with like data, you know, data set. We work with a lot of data scientists. So, and data analysts and people like that. So it's something that's kind of in my DNA. What I want to ask about is just about the technology then, because it was just being introduced. Would you credit your time at NCR for the exposure to that? The computers and then that software.
Put things in perspective. The first computer I sold was called an i8150.
So you sold computers
for NCR. Okay. Which eventually, and NCR at that point was 100 years old, storied company, like one of the top 10 respected companies in the world.
Like an IBM
because
at
of their training. We're the first to introduce a PC, but then IBM came and Microsoft, and they ate us for lunch. But the first computer I sold, 5 megabyte disk drive, 6-inch black and white screen, tape drive that you put in and put out, 64K in memory, $45,000.
Unreal.
That watch you're wearing right now is probably more powerful than that computer I sold.
I just have a little Fitbit on, Isn't that crazy? So who were you selling to at the time? Who were the client?
Hospitals and medical clinics. That was my first. And then over my career, I ended up being you got to remember, NCR at that point was like the gold standard of company. I mean, you watch old Westerns and you'll see an NCR cash register in the background. It's been around a long, long time. I became the youngest district manager in NCR's history at 24. My wife used to make fun of me. I wear NCR underwear. That's how well they took care of us. How well companies took care of you back then is evidenced by, I have 2 adopted children, right? They're twins. They were in an orphanage in Busan, Korea. And my wife and I were going through adoption process, but something happened real quick where all of a sudden we get a telephone call on a Wednesday that said, these 2 boys are up for adoption, but you got to make a decision within the next 24 hours, right? Those that have went through adoption process knows it's not cheap. I didn't have the money. I went to my boss and said, this is my predicament. Within the next day, I had money wired in from corporate to cover the total adoption cost.
That would never happen today.
Not today. NCR was a great, great company. It's another one of those sad states of IBM bought them and just drove it right into the ground.
So what you were selling were computers, which were brand new in the late 70s, to hospitals. Any other businesses just hospitals?
And NCR was broken up. They're called CIMEG, Commercial, Industrial, Medical, Education, and Government. And then it was huge, obviously, in retail and financial. Probably the majority of ATMs in the world were NCR ATMs. But then as my career advanced, then the personal computers took off. NCR had a special purpose systems division, which I became the district manager of, and did that until I jumped back into politics in 1988 when I was the campaign chairman for George Bush of the state of Wisconsin.
Bush Sr., got it.
And then in that whole 90s timeframe, when I talk about, who was my mentor, my mentors in the 90s was John MacIver.
How did you meet him?
Long story, as we'll do often in this interview, short. He was a lawyer at Michael Best and Frieder. Probably in Wisconsin's history, the most respected political mind that there ever was. Going back to 1968, he was Nixon's chairman in Wisconsin. MacIver tells the story. It's hilarious to hear him. He said, on election night in 1968, John Mitchell calls me up, drunker than a skunk, that they won and Nixon wants you to become an attorney general. And John said, fuck you, hung up, right? But John would never do the Washington thing, even though he was brilliant. So he's a Nixon. Warren Knowles, 1964. Tommy Thompson, I probably would say that if it wasn't for John MacIver and Jim Clouser, that he probably wouldn't have had such a successful career. George Bush. I mean, anybody political. And if you take a look at Wisconsin, where it kind of ended up in that 2008, 2010 timeframe, you had Paul Ryan would contribute his success to John MacIver. Reince Priebus, who was chairman of the Wisconsin Party and the National Party, and in Trump's chief of staff for a while, worked at Michael Best under John MacIver.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Scott Walker. I'm going to go right down the list. Scott Jensen, who's a school choice leader and former assembly head.
Speaker.
We're all mentored under John MacIver. So that, that 80s into the 90s timeframe, you went to John MacIver for political advice.
That was an era when the political parties had organizing was done through political parties. Would you consider him like a political boss at the time? I mean, reading up.
Pretty much, John, if you didn't have MacIver's blessing, you weren't going to go anywhere.
Those kingmakers definitely don't seem like they exist. Basically, I would say what would you say, maybe the mega donors might have more influence in
yeah. I had given that quite some thought over the last couple of years in Wisconsin specifically. If you had to go to somebody in Wisconsin right now, let's just say that you decided to run for governor, who do you go to? There is no infrastructure anymore.
Yeah.
There's not the John MacIver or the Mike Greeby or the people who really were not powerful in one sense, but really did it for the good of the state. Where now, as you said, it's probably the mega donors. And
how did he was it just because he was at an influential law firm in Milwaukee or where there were more of the population? What do you think drove his?
I think he did it for the good of the state, whether it's school choice, Tommy Thompson, whether it was open housing under Warren Knowles. John did things for the good of the state.
And he never served in any of the state
government
or federal government?
No. And he could have been attorney general. John could have been anything he wanted. That's not, he enjoyed being a lawyer and he enjoyed being that mentor and power broker.
Did he?
And civically, too. I mean, you take a look around Wisconsin today, the Pettit National Ice Center wouldn't be there if it wasn't for John MacIver. The museum, the wing at the lakefront, he was heavily involved in that. I can go down the list of the things that John MacIver was involved in.
Yeah.
And today, again, look around Wisconsin. Who do you go to? I can't think of anybody.
What's interesting, you kind of bring this up too. There's a bunch of books kind of being studied, studies that I kind of follow. I don't know why. I'm just very interested in this stuff, but they're definitely, what you're bringing up is people in power or political leaders at the time, maybe not directly in government, but they were driven by kind of a civic virtue. And there's some books out there like called Bowling Alone. I don't know if you heard of that, by some sociologists that just talk about how, Americans are kind of drifting away from civic organizations and kind of that, civic organizations of all stripes, like just your Kiwanis or your Elks Club, or, they're just basically, what they do is they join Facebook groups now, right?
Yeah, well,
Facebook groups are...
the difference between even, I'm going to say, the early 2000s and today is night and day. You take a look at, one would suggest that you're an influencer. John Connors is an influencer.
I suppose everybody is.
Based upon even like this podcast thing we're doing right here. Well, back then, in those years, Facebook didn't exist.
Yeah.
The iPhone wasn't invented till 2007, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So this whole change that you're seeing and how people are motivated to certain things is still evolving.
So I want to jump back to this data thing because I think or the computer, and this is the whole thing. So you took the state voter file.
Yeah.
What did a voter file look like, and what year was that?
It was
Did you do it?
1979.
And what did what did it come on a tape drive? Where'd you get it from? Like what?
A
printout
from the state election board.
Oh, wow. So they had a computer or a mainframe or something, the database at that time. So what was going on with computers
the whole thing had just started, evolved.
Okay.
And again, it's 79. All right. Now, obviously Reagan won, right?
Yep.
So you go through the Reagan presidency and now you're coming into, the mid to late 80s.
The computer age, basically, the beginning of it.
Computers really started to have an impact. Karl Rove started his direct mail firm, which that's how he became quite famous.
Would you say that was like the beginning of the direct mail era?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I remember I was Tommy Thompson's campaign manager in 1990. I remember meeting with Karl Rove to talk about direct mail and whether the campaign should hire him to do Tommy Thompson's direct mail. We chose somebody else, which is probably why Karl Rove bashed me all the time during the King campaign because he didn't like me. But yeah, starting out the 90s into the 90s is when the personal computers, became commonplace.
So when did the computers start getting introduced into campaigns or from when or this data?
Through the 80s.
Through the 80s? Okay.
But I don't think you saw the big shift until the introduction, like I said earlier, of the iPhone in 2007. Use the presidential campaigns as an example. It was the 2009, 2010, and what we did in Wisconsin, which is a whole different discussion, building a grassroots movement and flipping the state and how that was done, what it was based upon, the strategies and techniques. We started using the iPhone type technology to build crowds for our rallies back then, right? But then, so now you're in the 2010, 2012, right? The iPhone now has become kind of commonplace, but that whole 2007, the iPhone's introduced. The 2010 and 2011 is when we were heavy into the presidential campaign for Kane and what we were doing in Wisconsin, right? Kane understood the power of this whole social media phenomena that was just beginning to grow. Well, the best example is that whole presidential campaign, which if you put there's dozens of stories to be told, but there were 7 weeks that Kane was #1 in the polls, beating up Barack Obama without spending a penny on paid media.
Yeah.
Right? It was all social, using the social networks that were out there.
Very similar to how Trump
exactly
broke ahead in the 2016 primary and then eventually became the nominee. Would you attribute, we'll jump to Herman Cain as he was almost an original influencer in a way. I mean, he had his own radio show, right? Yep. I guess it was, people listened to it around the country because it was online. It was also on air in Atlanta or was it also syndicated across the country too?
Early on, it wasn't syndicated. Okay. It was picked up, before he announced for president, it was picked up and it was syndicated, I'm going to say, in 6 markets.
Okay.
Denver, and I can't remember the other ones, but it was syndicated then, but nothing like it would be today.
So your time at NCR, what did you learn at NCR in the corporate world that you brought back into politics when you got back into politics? And why'd you jump back in 1988?
Politics kind of like being on drugs, right?
Once you
get the high, it's really hard to kick, right?
Yeah.
So I spent 12 years with NCR Corporation, but still had my fingers in politics. As I told you before, I did the Bush campaign. Reagan gets elected, and really for those 8 years, I was kind of an outcast because the Reagan people didn't like the Bush people, and I was identified as a Bush person, right? But then when Bush was in 1988, the nominee, I was asked to take a leave of absence from NCR to be the campaign manager in Wisconsin. Little did I know that the real reason that I was asked to do that was to groom me to be Tommy Thompson's campaign manager in 1990.
And who was behind that?
It was MacIver.
MacIver, okay.
MacIver was the chair of Bush's campaign, and he was going to be the chair of Thompson's campaign. And I not only had a lot of respect for him, but he had a lot of respect for my organizational abilities and the things that I had brought to him over the decade, the things that we did together, like reapportionment. I mean, we did a lot of political projects together in the 90s, right? So what NCR taught me was more of the business world, all right? And how to be a good salesperson. Like, if I'm selling you something, John, and I got the order right now, shut up and get out. All you can do is screw it up if I keep talking.
Shut up and get out,
It's things like that. Great experience for, a kid in his 20s and early 30s.
So when you were thrusted back into the running campaign, a statewide presidential campaign, what was that like? No?
It's not really what it's like.
What did you learn?
One of the big things that came, the couple things out of the Thompson campaign, and again, anybody could have ran that campaign. Tommy Thompson was so popular, but there's a couple of things that really stick out, and it goes back to the grassroots. And you've known me for all these years. I'm a big grassroots guy. I'll take grassroots over paid media any day, right? So MacIver, one of the things that we did in the Thompson campaign is we spent a lot of time and effort and staff people recruiting elected officials, Republicans, Democrats, independents, sheriffs, county board people, city council people, mayors. If you're an elected official, we wanted you to be on the Thompson bandwagon. And it was because MacIver said, all of those elected officials are winners, right? They're elected. People elected them. They're winners. And have them speak for you, as you would say, they became influencers before influencers.
They were the influencers at the time.
And I think by the time election day came around, we had like 70% of elected officials in the state of Wisconsin supporting Tommy Thompson.
And this was in 1990. Okay. So this was when he first ran. Okay. Yeah. So he got elected in 86. The first. Okay. Yep. Were you involved in that campaign, or you're just in the re-election?
I was heavily involved in NCR. It was somewhat as a sidebar. I remember in 86 when Thompson announced, I remember him calling me and asking me if I would get involved, but he wanted me to run for office for state assembly.
Oh, interesting.
And, I'm this kid in his 20s making over $100,000 a year. I'm not going to give this up.
Run for assembly.
Yeah. Which goes back to when I changed my philosophy about involvement in politics was after I lost the assembly race in 1976. It became apparent that I was much better in the background than I was being a candidate.
Yeah.
All right. And again, the rest is history, which kind of segues into my whole dream since high school. My number one thing I wanted to do in life was to be a chief of staff to a congressman. Well, I kind of bettered that in becoming a chief of staff to a presidential campaign candidate. But going back to the Thompson campaign, that was the one thing that came out of that was how important local officials are. And I think you kind of have seen that progress over the years. Sometimes you don't think endorsements matter, but they kind of do because they reach people that you may not reach.
Yeah. I wonder, you don't see a whole lot of that endorsement grabbing at the local level. Like, you know what I mean? Typically at a statewide campaign, I mean, even in Texas, you want your sheriff's endorsement if you can get it. You want law enforcement to back you, or you want...
You asked about Supreme Court races before. The big change back prior to the Wilcox, if you got the sheriffs, if you got the DAs, if you got the people in the call to come out and endorse you, you pretty much won. Because prior to these campaigns becoming these national referendums on, like Wisconsin, the last one on everything from abortion to redistricting to control of Congress, they didn't capture people's attention and weren't.
But I would say, from my experience too, you have local officials are really hesitant to endorse national level today, or wouldn't you say? I mean, it depends on the.
It depends on which year. That Trump's first time, I think you would find people that wouldn't admit they even voted for him, and now, I mean, they're jumping on board. You see the titans of industry going to meet with them.
Yeah, the bandwagon.
I think what you really got to do, whether it's, when I started in the 70s to where you're at now, you really got to understand what's happening, not only in the world, but what's happening in Wisconsin, and kind of figure it out, and what your strategy should be from there. But then you get puzzled, like this last Supreme Court race in Wisconsin still puzzles me to this day. Brad Schimmel was a great candidate, ran a really good campaign, and for him to lose by as large as he lost just baffles me.
Well, what do you think happened?
I think outside influence, absolutely.
Do some of the people in the state, kind of attribute the loss? I mean, he was a great candidate. I mean, he really was, ran a great campaign, but they attribute some of the outside influences, maybe some of the unpopularity with like Elon Musk coming in heavy-handed. I mean,
Which goes to what I was saying. You really got to see what's happening on a day-to-day basis to figure out your strategies. But it's kind of like what we did with ActBlue. All right. Let's talk about ActBlue for a second. All right. Because it's an interesting story in how I got involved in the ActBlue controversies.
So I heard about this all of a sudden.
Wait, you should tell them what ActBlue is.
ActBlue is this online fundraising platform. I would say it's more akin to like a payment processor fused with social media. Really like a social platform. So if you're a Democratic donor or a candidate or a third party, where they all use ActBlue as the platform to process their donations to their organizations or to their political campaign. And if you're a donor, you go on and you give them your $20. And then after you do that, it accepts recurring donations. It databases that donor, and then it suggests to the donor other candidates or organizations that are like-minded. And there's a huge network of clients that are on ActBlue, whether they're campaigns at the local level, right down to the dog catcher level, to members of Congress, to third-party groups. So they have this. Blue is basically this. It's like a social media network. It's a database. It's a payment processor on top, a recommendation engine for fueling Democratic politics,
one of the
right?
most successful fundraising tools ever in the history of politics.
Yeah. So one day, and I don't remember when this was, someone texted me and they had a screenshot of you on TV. I forgot what TV channel. I don't remember what it was, if it was Fox or something like that. And someone said, Mark Block is in the news again. And I'm like, what? And I opened up the text message, and then I started getting, because you and I had worked together really early, I started getting this, emails, Mark Block's in the news, hey, look at what Mark Block is doing. And it was you, basically what happened is I don't know if you woke up one day and you checked ActBlue or someone brought this to your attention, but basically someone.
Here's the story.
Tell me what happened.
And what eventually happened and what I think is going to eventually happen. All right. So in probably 10 years ago, this is after the Kane campaign's over. I'm in California doing a project for Duncan Hunter, running for Congress.
Yeah.
And there was a local library issue going on that I thought was interesting. So what I did, and I've done this more than once, where I will sign up to get information for whatever the issue is or the cause is, but I won't use my name or my email address, right? So I signed up for this one as Bernie Kane, but I used my Kane email address from the campaign, which was ceo.kane@gmail.com.
Yep.
Right? 10 years ago, thought nothing of it.
Did you donate or did you just sign up? Just sign up.
It's a way to see how the other side is messaging to you, right?
Yep. It's basic. It's what every campaign or anybody does or should do.
All right. So now it's August of last year, right? And I get this email thanking me for my contribution to Joe Biden. Didn't think nothing of it, right?
You were just checking that other email, or you were perusing to see what emails came in?
I still have that email address.
Yeah.
I don't use it, but it's still there. I mean, you could send me an email to COS@gmail.com and I'll get it, right?
Yeah.
Didn't think nothing of it. And then, like the next week, I get 3-4 emails thanking me for contributions to various liberal socialist causes. Still didn't think nothing of it because I'm busy running my company. Then Biden drops out and Harris is now the nominee, right? But the 2 weeks prior to that, I must have got, 24 emails thanking me for my contribution.
How much were these contributions?
They were $1.50, $2.50, $10, all small contributions, right? But what really struck me was the 24 hours after she became the nominee, the press is glowing about all these millions and millions and millions of new donors she has, right? And millions of dollars, not millions of donors, but millions of dollars that she raised in such a short period of time. And I'm going like, something doesn't, I mean, I've been there, right? So something like that just doesn't happen by accident, right? So then you start hearing the stories about people who names have been attributed to giving all these donations and they never did. Well, between that time frame and the election, I think my email thank yous, I got like 580 thank yous for my contributions to congressional candidate, liberal causes, Harris for president, Democrats for this, Democrats for that.
Were you getting like a receipt?
Yeah.
It wasn't your credit card though. Okay.
No, it wasn't mine.
Well, was it a credit card or a debit card or okay?
Yeah. It was an American Express card. Again, I'm busy, and one could suggest I put my time in purgatory already, right? But I was telling this story to a friend of mine, and he told another friend who American First Foundation called me and said, we're hearing, and James O'Keefe had a couple.
Yeah,
James O'Keefe had a couple essays about people who names hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations and they never made them, right? And they said that they wanted to take a look at this, right? So again, the lawyers get involved and try to find out, something doesn't smell right here. About the same time frame, Congressman Brian Stile from Wisconsin starts doing kind of an investigation into foreign donations into campaigns through ActBlue, right? They had a couple fascinating conversations with people that were investigating this who had spent their lifetime like with Interpol and tracking terrorist money. And they're saying that where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So the lawyers said, that, they want to sue ActBlue to find out where this money's coming from in my name, okay? Now, this is where it gets fascinating to me. And I hope that, and Trump just announced to have the Attorney General find out what's behind the ActBlue
open up a
story.
Right? So last Thursday, I believe, Trump signed an executive order telling Attorney General Pam Bondi to open up a probe into ActBlue and basically what happened to you.
More than just what happened to me. Because when you hear the rest of the story, one always has to have respect for your opponents, right? I give ActBlue a lot of credit for covering their ass every which way but loose, all right? So lawyers file a lawsuit on my behalf against John Doe.
Okay, is this through America First Policy Institute or okay, got it.
Right. Yep. Not against ActBlue, but against John Doe.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Who is John Doe that's making contributions? Because we had an American Express number, right? Who's making these donations where I'm getting the thank you email for, right? Because if one could suggest that the algorithm that ActBlue uses goes out and finds email addresses of people that they can start then funneling money into these campaigns through these thousands and thousands of individuals at a dollar level that keeps it below the FBC level of $200.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to report it. Right. Again, go back to Harris raised how much money in 24 hours?
It was staggering out. We'll look it up.
Something's not right here. All right. So they decided to file the lawsuit against John Doe in Waukesha County. And the judge that we're assigned is Brad Schiff, who's about ready to announce for Supreme Court, right? So the couple hearings before Schimmel, this is where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Because ActBlue hired the legal team, like, wait a minute.
Who'd they come in with?
There's nothing. It was probably 3 or 4 different
law firms,
nationally,
white glove firms out of D.C. or New York,
and one of the Godfrey and Kahn out of Wisconsin, right? So you're going like, if there's nothing here, then why are they throwing every law firm and the effort behind it that they're doing? All right. So what the lawyers were asking for is for the records on John Doe, right? Because through investigative work, we found out that there was a Bernie Kane in California.
Interesting. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
This was a real guy, right? So we subpoenaed him And again, you have to take a look at the court records and talk to lawyers for all the details on this. But Bernie King would never respond to us, right? Even though I suppose he's a real guy, right?
He had an address, and did they serve a subpoena to him, or
he had a P.O. box at like a UPS store?
Okay,
right?
Interesting,
right? Huh. So our guys did everything. At the same time all this is going on, there's another group in Wisconsin that is looking at what they call smurfing, all right? And they found 20 potential people who made multiple contributions, and they hired a private investigator that went out and talked to these people that said, we didn't make those contributions. I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't.
So smurfing is making a political contribution through a platform under a real person's name, but it wasn't them making the. Exactly. Okay, got it. Okay,
which is part of the other thing I think. The Attorney General Bondi's looking at, not just the foreign influence that's come in, but this whole smurfing thing. Our people said, "Well, my God, we talked to 20 people, and 6 of them said that they never made these contributions." So they proceeded ahead. We had a hearing before Judge Schimmel, and he denied everything that ActBlue tried to do to squash it, and said, all right, you can subpoena these people and find this out, find that out. Well, in a very short period of time, this is where I say you respect your opponent. ActBlue had their act together so that when our people went and subpoenaed the people that had prior said they had nothing to do with this, now they're saying, yeah, I made those contributions. And the law firms produced the documents from Bernie Kane's bank statements, American Express, that he made these contributions. And so it was all legal. And but one has to go back and say, something don't smell right here. But I got to give them credit. They had their ass covered every which way. So we decided to drop our lawsuit in Brad Schimmel's court in Waukesha because it could have came back in the press and perhaps done a little harm in his Supreme Court race.
Okay.
That he was favoring this Republican operative, yada, yada, yada. So we dropped it, right? And that's kind of where it stands right now. Now, I think it's going to pick up again, because if I was the Attorney General of the United States, I'd be subpoenaing all the bank records of all these people that said, we didn't do it. Now they said they did do it. If they did do it, how'd the money get into their account? Because they didn't have the financial capacity to do it. So way back when we first met, there was a political operative named Steve King, used to be an FBI agent. And what Steve taught me is always follow the money and you'll figure out what's going on.
Did they ever see this Bernie Kane in the flesh? No. But Bernie Kane produced always through attorneys.
Yep. Never responded to any requests from our attorneys.
And these other people that were smurfed that then changed their stories, were they Republicans? Were they Democrat? I mean, what was their? Does anybody? I don't know. So, what do you think is going? What do you think's going on?
My instincts tell me you got to give them a lot of credit. They funneled, and I don't say this other than this is kind of what people that do this for a living, for a career, follow the money from China, from North Korea, from Iran, cartels, money funneled through Tennessee into ActBlue. There's a lot of money being funneled. I think that that's more of an issue, in my opinion, than the smurfing that was going on, even though it's a travesty on our whole system.
Yeah.
But the foreign money, and if you think about who was potentially funneling this money through ActBlue, it was all those that did not want Trump to be elected, right? Why would the cartels want Trump elected? Why would Iran want Trump reelected? Yeah. Go down the list. That's what they really got to find out.
Do you think ActBlue really knew? We're speculating. You think they knew?
Absolutely.
Because
John, the top attorneys, the in-house counsel for ActBlue have resigned.
Yeah.
That's not by accident.
No. What I think is fascinating, back to this Amex with Kane. I mean, did you see like American Express statements with Bernie Kane's? Did you ever get that far?
I did, because it was all privileged and information redacted. The attorney saw
Did they ever get to go to American Express and get that statement to make sure the statement is...
That's what we were trying to do.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I don't know if American Express ever provided it or not. I think that was all privileged.
So what do you think's going to happen to ActBlue?
Let's go back to the bigger picture, right? I've said this for a long time. Trump is the only one in history that can implement a transformational change in how the world works, right? Kane got it started, but he would have never been able to pull off what Trump's doing right now. John, you're out of age. I won't be here to see it. But history, for you, you'll see what he's doing today will change how this world operates. You could spend hours talking to all the different ways. But one of them is this ActBlue or it's horrible what people have gotten away with. I think that they've got the balls of a cat burglar, and they're going to be able to dig subpoena and get to the bottom, not just the attorney general, but I think you're seeing Congress finally getting some backbone and digging into this and seeing, how did this really happen? Yeah. How did ActBlue, funnel millions and millions and millions of dollars into our political system from foreign governments or the technology?
And how long has this been going on?
This goes back to the 50-some years I've been in this business, right? I've seen the pendulum swing, right? I've always learned from your mistakes. So let's go back to 1988. Bush loses Wisconsin, right? After the election, I started getting dozens of phone calls saying, I went to vote, and the poll worker told me I could only vote straight Democrat, right? Dozens and dozens of phone calls like that. But I'm a firm believer, unlike others, using 2020 election as the example. Once an election's over, it's over. There's nothing you can do about it, right? I was working for Mark Newman, ran for Congress, and I think that one we lost by 769 votes. We've looked at some precincts in Racine. Didn't make sense. The large voter turnout. We went out and investigated. It was an empty field, right? There's nobody living there. It's an empty field. But once an election's over, it's over.
Yeah.
So 1988, right? In Milwaukee, dozens of phone calls, people that said that they were told they could only vote straight Democrat. Nothing you can do about it. It's over, right? You can't prove it one way or the other. So in 1990, when I was Governor Thompson's campaign manager, I'll never forget going to John MacIver and Jim Clouser saying, I need $20,000 budgeted. I think it was 32 of the largest African-American men we could find, paid them to stand at the polls on election day to do nothing but stand there, right? In Milwaukee County. It's the first time in 48 years a Republican won Milwaukee County. By coincidence?
Wow.
No, right? So it kind of like when you talk about what's happening today, I think that whoever they are wasn't able to steal the 2024 election because what they did in 2020, there's too many eyes watching it, all right?
Yep.
And there actually were plans in place to make sure there wasn't this massive voter fraud. The voter fraud's out there.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody that tells you that it isn't are either smoking crack, lying, or...
Well, I remember this was in probably 2008. I helped you do it because remember I procured some of the voter data, but we did in Milwaukee County. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh, yeah.
You were like, John, just get me a list of 20 or 30,000. I don't know if they were aid or then they hadn't voted in a while and then they voted.
Yeah.
And we mailed out a first-class postcard with a first-class stamp. And I was like, why are you paying for a first-class stamp on a postcard? And you're like, because we want the returns.
Yep.
And I'll never forget that you mailed it out of the office. And I remember every day you would bring in a rubber band full of these postcards. They're undeliverable addresses. And it filled...
to registered voters.
To register. And it filled up definitely like a couple of those mail cart or those big mail bins. And we went through and I think we entered it into a spreadsheet and we found that, some of these addresses literally didn't even have homes on the lots, right? So that was really, but I think we also got a little bit of, didn't we get some flack from the Milwaukee County?
Voter intimidation.
Yeah, that's right. The voter caging is what called it. And today, that's what a lot of different groups are now focusing on to clean up the voter rolls, right? Or undeliverable addresses or lots that don't exist. And it's still, I work in the voter file every week. I'm in looking at, and there's always going to be, I just think there's inherent problems in the voter file. But yeah, there's a lot of registrations that are problematic. Yeah. So that was pretty eye-opening to me, just the staggering number of addresses that there should be a resident at or someone who was registered at one point that didn't exist. I mean,
the system makes it pretty easy to cheat, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I wouldn't want to get caught, that's for sure.
But what are the consequences?
Yeah. And the thing is it doesn't seem like the state or any of these states are enforcing or have the resources to really dig into some of the voter roll. I mean, it seems like a big back block.
Let's go back, 10 minutes ago when we were talking about the consequential change that Trump is making, right? And one of the many things is this whole voter integrity, right? If anybody can do that, it's Trump and his people, because it's kind of like if you go back to Reagan, the first 2 years, they knew they were going to have problems beating inflation. It's going to be a little tough, but once you came out of it, things are going to be better, which worked. Or even the way I think Trump thinks of President McKinley in 1898 to the 1900s, he was a big tariff guy, right? And he caught all kinds of grief being the tariff guy early on. But what came out of it was these huge revenues, which you're kind of starting to see now. By the way, I think that they need to do a better job of messaging that these tariff revenues that they're seeing today is one of the ways that Trump can do away with your income tax if you make less than $250,000 a year. You imagine getting that implemented if no federal tax paid up to $250,000? Do you know what that would do for the economy?
Yeah.
Oh my! It would be on steroids.
The problem is I think the issue is they just started collecting those revenues. Whatever was it? We're in end of April, so it's been only a month, right, since they started. Well, they have tariff history because he implemented tariffs in the first term. So yeah, I think there's just you can see the media, they don't like them, so they're not helping the administration tell their story at all. I mean, it's just everything is negative. Anyway, thanks for spending 3 hours doing this.
Quite frankly, as you move forward, if this thing really does get anybody that listens to it, if we want to do more of these and segue into topics of the day, I do have opinions on what some people might listen to.
I'll probably take you up on it for sure. I want to definitely interview, more people. I think Tim Phillips would be really interesting for sure. I got a bunch of clients that I want to kind of take them away from and try to think more high level about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And because they, people that are running organizations or political things, they're too in the weeds on it.
What's the impact of what they do?
Exactly. Yeah. That's definitely something we got to communicate. So 30, how many years did you work?
At least over 52 years I've been doing this.
Wow.
So, and even when my corporate life, I was involved in politics. And even the company that I have now, Mother Nature's Trading Company, obviously still involved in politics.
Yeah. So, are you officially retired from politics, would you say now?
What happened, John? Last fall, I was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, shit.
And I just 2 weeks ago finished treatment.
Wow.
And it's kind of a life-changing thing.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Holy moly. You look good. You look like, you don't look like are you done with treatment?
I'm done with treatment right now. Okay. They've halted the cancer, but it could come back at any time. So when people tell you that they take one day at a time, those of us that have the experience of knowing that you might be dying, then you anticipated take one
at a time. So what was that like? I mean, did you ever expect to have to go through something like that in your life? Or?
I don't think anybody does. I think Joe the plumber,
I remember,
passed away from pancreatic cancer, told me when I called him and said, it's the worst thing that a doctor could tell you. You've got cancer, because you really don't know if you've got a month or if you got 10 years. If the treatment did what it's supposed to do this time around, I should be around till I'm 80, 90.
Good. Okay.
Fortunate.
Cross our fingers one day at a time. But 50, you still do some politics while you're still involved while you can?
Well, obviously, and the ActBlue thing, one would say, was being involved in politics. I am concentrated on my company.
Tell me a little bit about this is Mother
Nature's Trading Company. And this is another God thing. I had just finished a presidential campaign in Nigeria, and I realized I'm too old for this. And it flew back, and I was in Washington, D.C., and ran into a friend who was telling me about his cousin that is one of the largest cranberry growers in the world. And he was frustrated with ocean spray because they're a bunch of old white guys like me that couldn't think outside the box. But he was cold pressing cranberry seeds to get cranberry seed oil. And it was when it was 3 o'clock in the morning things, I'm going like, wake up and going like, Congress is going to pass the agriculture bill that makes it legal to extract cannabinoids or CBD from that plant. It's just really healthy for you. The studies show that. What happens if you combine the health benefits of CBD with cranberry seed oil? And Mother Nature's Trading Company was born. We came out with products, a line called Chronology for humans, that's extremely healthy, beneficial for you. Herman Cain was the chairman of our board and very instrumental in the branding of our products. The Chronology brand or the Silk brand is skincare, or one of the most brilliant ones that we did was the Cowboy Up. People find it hard to believe, especially people down here in the South, where Cowboy Up, it's like when you say Cowboy Up, it's like you're cool. It's the thing. When I first sat down with our trademark attorney and said, we want to trademark Chronology, Mother Nature's Trading Company, Silk, and Cowboy Up, he looked at me and said, like, yeah, right, you're nuts. Walked out of there. Nobody had trademarked Cowboy Up.
Wow.
I own Cowboy Up.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it's been very successful. Learning lessons along the way. I'm convinced the marketplace is through influencers. We spend majority of our time with His Glory and Pastor Dave and are looking for new markets through influencers. So it's been good. Looking for somebody that can take it to the next level because I'm getting old.
You're ready to maybe officially retire.
I got 5 grandkids and I really enjoy spending time with them as they grow old. That's where I like to spend more of my time.
Good. Well, Mark Block, thank you for the time today. I've learned a ton from you every time we visit, so thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to Campaign Now, a conversation with Mark Block. See you next time.